Hello everyone, this is your history professor once again, and this is our lecture on section 18 of History 231, Ancient Mediterranean World. And today we're going to be discussing the early Roman Empire, covering roughly the years 14 to 138 AD or CE, depending on how you like to use it, but the same time period. Okay, so let us now be talking a little bit about this here. The first thing to be aware of is that we are now dealing, remember, with an empire. The Roman Empire, no longer the Roman Republic. The Roman Republic is dead. D-E-D, dead. It's not coming back. It's never coming back. It's over. And it collapsed basically for a lot of reasons, and we could talk endlessly about that. But when it collapsed, it was replaced with an empire. An empire means an emperor. It means that you no longer have a republic where you are voting for people to take important offices to run the state. Now, locally, you may still vote for people. You may still vote for your mayor or something like that. So it is not as though democratic voting disappeared 100%, but it is largely gone, and it's been replaced with a dictatorship, basically with one guy at the top, and that guy is the emperor. And there's going to be an emperor of the Roman Empire, which is going to last about 500 years, or almost 500 years in the western part, about 1,500 years in the eastern part, and some people even argue that the descendants, ultimately political descendants of the Roman emperors, lasted all the way until the collapse of the czars in Russia, and I'll leave that to other historians to debate that point. The point is, however, that the idea of the Roman Empire is going to be around for quite some time, and what this means is really quite important, because the establishment and maintenance of the Roman Empire in many ways is a foundational part of what we might call the Western world. Now keep in mind, we've already talked in this class about how Persia, the Persian Empire, established the idea of the Middle East. The Middle East being, of course, the area we think of the Middle East today, which covers, at least was covered by the Persian Empire, with the exception of course, of Arabia. The modern Middle East and the Persian Empire are almost the same thing. So that means the idea of the Middle East ultimately comes from the Persians and the Persian Empire. Well, the idea of the West, we can put it in quotes, is an idea which comes to us because of Rome, because of particularly the Roman Empire, which is going to last a very long time, as we will see. And it's going to have its ups and downs. It's going to be very interesting. But what it's going to do is it's going to homogenize culture, and it's going to integrate society in a way that gives us the idea of a Western world, which is one we still have again today. So that's going to be very interesting. And the guy who makes this all happen is, of course, our old friend Octavian Augustus. Remember, Octavian was his name when he was younger, but he becomes emperor. He takes on the name Augustus, based on the word August, which means wonderful and great and all that sort of thing. Isn't Latin fun? But anyway, Octavian Augustus is one of the most important people in the history of the world, bar none. He's hugely important because he's the guy who sets up the Roman Empire, which again becomes extremely important in human history. So old Octavian Augustus sets this thing up, he rules, and he's very effective, but of course he's a human being, which means eventually he's going to die, and he does eventually die. He had tried very hard to set up his succession, to come up with someone to take over for him. He'd wrecked his own daughter's life to try and do it. That didn't work out. So finally he is succeeded by an adopted son, a fellow named Tiberius. All right, and Tiberius succeeds without any trouble, and he becomes the new Roman emperor. All right, so yay, hooray, hurrah, everything should be fine, right? Well, let's see how this all works out. Tiberius is a very interesting guy. He is not Augustus. He is not our friend Octavian Augustus. He doesn't have his charisma. He does not have his charisma. He doesn't have his political schmoozing ability. But he does have one thing really good, and that is to say he's a very good administrator. He's good at running things. But he's not charismatic. He's not any fun. He's an old stick in the mud. He is something that actually we don't see much in politics today. We see people who talk about this, but they don't actually do it. And that is what we call a true fiscal conservative. Now again, You don't see true fiscal conservatives very often in politics today because, of course, they're no fun. And the trouble with fiscal conservatives is they're obsessed with balancing the budget and paying the bills. And let's face it, American presidents in the last, oh heaven, since Reagan and even before, were not all that interested in balancing the budget. They wanted to spend, but they didn't want to tax. And of course, that has set up a massive level of debt. And this is a big problem in the United States today. It's something we're having to contend with. And of course, it makes it all the harder to contend with when we're dealing with a coronavirus outbreak, which is, of course, what we're dealing with here. So this pandemic is exacerbating a problem, but it goes back long before this time. Our massive level of debt. And this is because we borrowed to spend so we can spend more than we tax. Lower taxes, but raise spending. It doesn't work. It never has worked. It's never going to work. You've got to eventually pay the bills, right? Well, our friend Tiberius, he's one of these old stick in the muds that says, you never do that. You never, ever, ever spend more than you have. He's a fiscal conservative. And what does this mean? It means that he doesn't want to have wild, large public spectacles and parties and things like that. He wants things to be quiet and efficient, which is really good, except it's not any fun. Say what you will about Reagan. The Reagan years, the 80s, I remember the Reagan years. They may not have been fiscally very smart because Reagan's policies were fiscally disastrous, but boy, they were a lot of fun. And Americans had a heck of a lot of fun in the 80s, and the 80s are still remembered by those of us who lived through them as a lot of fun. It was a fun time. We're paying for it, of course. Now, you're kicking the can down the road, but here's the thing. Tiberius isn't any fun at all. He's dull as dishwater. He's boring. And the Romans, they like spectacles. They like their fun. So he's not very popular. So he's not a popular emperor. He's not like our friend Octavian Augustus. He's not popular. But he's really good at his job. Now, what this means is that when eventually Tiberius himself dies, and he dies in 37 AD, there was actually celebrating. The boring old guy is gone. Yay, hooray, hurrah. Now we can party. We can have fun, right? But here's the thing. Here's the real thing, right? How do you pick the next emperor? This is going to be a problem. This is a serious problem. And this is something that thankfully we in the United States, the founding fathers of the United States, had the good sense to address right away when they wrote the Constitution. They said we have to come up with a way so that when the old president is out of office, we have a smooth transition to the new president. And as long as we do that, the system continues to function. If you ever have a president who says we're going to postpone or cancel the national election for president, you've got yourself a serious problem in this country. And I hope to God we never reach that point because it would be catastrophic. All right? So the fact is America has a really smooth, effective way of coming up with who's going to be the next president. We have campaigns, we have elections, the new president comes in, the old president steps aside, and the new administration takes over. And this has been going on since the founding of the Republic. All right? And yes, every now and then a president dies in office or something, and we have a system for dealing with that kind of succession too. The Romans, they didn't have that. The Romans didn't have a constitution that allowed them to do this. So who gets to be the next emperor is always going to be a thorny, difficult question for these guys. And it's going to be a very thorny question because the emperor has near absolute power. And of course, what does absolute power do? It attracts people, and not always the right kind of people, to run things. So this is what the Romans are going to have to deal with. So Tiberius dies. Look, he's dead. He's gone. He's out of the picture. His successor is a guy named Gaius. Who goes by a nickname Caligula. And old Caligula, I gave him a star, not because he's a nice guy, well, maybe for the opposite reason. He's memorable. We'll say this for the guy. He is the great-nephew of Tiberius. He's the last surviving son of the guy who was supposed to take over Tiberius, a guy named Germanicus, but that guy died before Tiberius did, so that didn't help. So Caligula comes in. Now, Caligula is young. He's about 24 years old. 24 years old. And he has now been given control of the biggest empire in the Western world. He's got a lot of power and nobody to answer to. Now here's the thing. The Constitution of the United States has age limits. You've got to be a certain age to be a congressperson. You've got to be a certain age to be a senator, and you've got to be a certain age to be the president. You cannot be too young. Why did they do that? Why did the founding fathers do that in our Constitution? Because they studied their history, and they knew what happens when you get people who are too young into positions of too much power. And sure enough, this was what happens here. A 24-year-old becomes absolute ruler of the Roman Empire, and he starts to party. He goes crazy. Caligula was mentally unstable. Now, I'm being charitable when I say that. He's mentally unstable. Let's discuss some of his craziness. He liked to dominate others. There are some people out there who have this weird, twisted view of the world that they get off on dominating, controlling, having power over other human beings gives them some kind of a thrill. I don't know why, because I don't have that thrill. I don't get a thrill out of dominating. I don't like to do it. I don't like having that. But he did, and he likes dominating others. And then he has another problem as well. He's a sadist. He gets some kind of a cheap, sick thrill out of watching other people suffer. And there are people like that out there. They are kind of creepy, all right? They're kind of creepy. Now, this is the way this guy is. So what does he do? He orders men to be killed so, and I quote, they could feel they were dying. It gives him a thrill for people to realize I'm going to die, and he gets off on that. He gets a thrill out of that. In one case, he takes a famous actor, a guy with a wonderful theatrical voice. This guy was really good at being on stage and doing theatrical stuff. A wonderful voice, and he has the guy beaten so that the guy's screams in this beautiful theatrical voice could be heard. He could hear himself screaming, and this gives Caligula some kind of sick thrill here. And then Caligula does something else, and this is always a huge warning, and this is a warning sign we've seen before. Caligula believed he was a living god. Now remember, if your professor ever walks into the lecture or goes online and it's not April 1st and they stand up and say they're a living god, it's time to call the guys in the white coats with the wraparound straitjackets and haul them away because they've lost their marbles. Now, April 1st, you can get away with it because it's April Fool's Day, but otherwise, you just don't do this. Caligula says, I'm a god, and he has his own head put on the statue of Zeus at Olympia in Greece here. He says, I'm going to put up a big statue of myself as a god in Jerusalem and let all those Jews look at it. That is a really stupid idea. People who think they're gods, or godlike, or above the law, tend to do increasingly stupid and crazy things. But they're also entertaining. I mean, say what you will, crazy leaders can be fun if you're not too close to them. And so these antics at first were very popular in Rome. Remember, they were very bored with old boring Tiberius, and so now they've got a crazy man. This is lots of fun to watch until Caligula ran out of money. And then what he did was he said, I'm going to raise taxes to finance my crazy, insane things. And what happens to your popularity when you do crazy things and you expect the taxpayer to pay for it? Oh, it goes south fast. His money runs out. Everything starts to crash around him. And it's pretty obvious this guy's a problem. But the problem is also that he's young. He may be around for a while. He could be around for decades. How long is the Roman Empire going to last with a lunatic like this in charge for decades? It isn't going to make it. It's not going to work. And so pretty soon people are starting to say, we got to get rid of him. But here's the thing. They don't have a constitution. In the United States, if we had a president who acted like this crazy, publicly crazy, we would impeach him and he would lose the impeachment and he'd be gone. We have a way of removing crazy presidents. Now, say what you will about this president or that, whether they should be impeached. The fact is we do have a mechanism in place to try and do it. We can do it. Richard Nixon got really crazy at the end and he would have been removed had he not resigned. All right, so this is something we and our founding fathers have put into place. And the reason we did is they studied their history. And what did they find? Guys like Caligula, and they said, we can't have this. All right? So we got to have a way of getting rid of crazy presidents, crazy leaders, crazy important people, right? Now, if that system works, then that keeps the crazy guy from saying, maybe I don't want to go too far. All right? Caligula, he has none of those restrictions. He goes crazy, so the only way to get rid of him, the Romans realized, is to kill him. So finally, a plot is hatched, and he is killed. He's assassinated, stabbed to death in one of the galleries of his palace, and that's the end of him. Well, here's the thing, and this is why assassination, one of the reasons assassination is such a risky business. Okay, you can argue Caligula had to go. I totally get it, all right? But if you don't have a plan for what happens after he's dead, you've got yourself another problem. All right? And this, again, is one of the reasons that the Constitution of the United States is such an amazing document. Because if we have President Crazy Man removed from office by impeachment, Vice President whoever will take over automatically. And if Vice President whoever can't take over, the Speaker of the House takes over. We have a whole line of succession of who gets to be president if the previous person can't do it. We anticipated this problem. Our founding fathers said, we've got to do this. We got to plan for this. Even if we never use these emergency plans, we have them in place in our Constitution. And that's one of the reasons for America's success. All right? So, what do you do now? Well, they've killed Caligula. He's dead. He's on the ground. He's bleeding out. He's dead. All right? The Praetorian Guard, the guys who were supposed to guard him, were actually the guys who killed him. And they said, okay, we got to get rid of him. But now what? We need an emperor. It's obvious we can't go back to the Republic. That's history. That's done. It's over. We need an emperor. Where are we going to get an emperor? So they go wandering through the palace looking for an emperor, and they find one, hiding in a closet. This is a guy named Claudius, the third emperor. Now, Claudius is an interesting guy. He ruled from 41 to 54 AD. Claudius is a very interesting guy because he's an older guy. Now, he's not young. He's an older guy, and he grew up kind of in the palace around Octavian Augustus, and he's seen a Caligula, and he's always kept under the radar. He's kept a low profile. People have regarded him as being, well, stupid. And the reason they regarded him as stupid is because he was a stutterer, all right? And one of the most dangerous mistakes you can ever make is assume that somebody with a handicap, whatever that handicap may be, like being a stutterer, means that they're stupid. That's a really stupid thing to think. The fact of the matter is that just because someone's a stutterer doesn't mean they're not smart. And Claudius is really, really smart. So the Praetorian Guard finds this old guy. They drag him out of his hiding place and they say, we need an emperor, you're the guy. And they figured, hey, we can control this old guy because we think he's an idiot. They were wrong. Claudius was very, very smart. Very sharp guy. And so what does Claudius do? He turns out to be a really effective and powerful emperor. He even invaded Britain successfully, something Julius Caesar had failed to do. Claudius pulls it off. This guy was extremely successful, and he starts to put together an effective bureaucratic apparatus to run the empire. So he's actually a really successful, a good emperor. But of course he can't live forever either. So when he dies, they need a new emperor. And how do they get a new emperor? Well, they get a new emperor because they don't have a system of succession worked out yet. They still don't have one of these things. And eventually they pick a guy. All right? They pick a guy whose name is Nero. And you may have heard of Nero. Nero is another one of these crazy, disastrously bad emperors, right? So once Claudius is out of the picture, he's gone, and now Nero takes over. Now Nero is sort of like Caligula, but not. He's not as stark raving mad. Caligula appears to have really lost his mind. Nero, however, is a little nuts. Nero is a strange sort of guy. He's young, again, same problem, inexperienced, he doesn't really know what he's doing, and he's unfortunately got one talent that Caligula didn't have. Nero is really good at foiling plot attempts against himself. So when someone decides to get rid of Nero, he's able to foil the plot. So what Nero starts to do is he says, hey, I'm an artist. He was an artistic guy. And you've always wondered, if only Nero could have just stayed and done his art instead of being emperor, who knows how history might have gone. So old Emperor Nero, he is an artist. All right, and he wants to spend his time doing his art, and he doesn't care about the budget, he doesn't care about being a good emperor, he doesn't care about administration, none of those things. And so pretty soon it's pretty obvious this guy's a loser too. This guy's not going to work out. This is a bad emperor. We got to get rid of this guy. But he had one talent, foiling plots against him. He was very good at keeping people from killing him. All right, and as a result, he starts killing off competent Romans who are plotting against him because they realize he's an idiot. So this is a real problem, right? This goes on for a while. He pays for building projects. He likes to build grand artistic buildings. Ooh, it's very exciting, right? He likes to build for these. How do you pay for it? This is a really important point. How do you pay for all this stuff? When governments spend a lot of money, how do you pay for them? Well, one of the things you can always do is devalue the currency. Here's what they did in the ancient world. You get so much silver to make coins with. This will be your coinage. And you say, we'll mix in a little bit of lead with the silver. No one's going to notice, and we'll be able to make more coins, and we'll pretend we have more money than we really do. Today we do this on computers, and when governments do this too long on computers, it starts to become a problem. Now again, right now we're in a national crisis. We have to do it. We don't have a choice. With this virus outbreak, we absolutely have to start pumping tons of money into the economy. So I totally get it. But during times of prosperity, we still do it, and that's a mistake. That's a mistake. All right. Well, Nero doesn't care. He starts debasing the currency that way. And what happens? The currency crashes. The value of the coins goes down, and you start to see all sorts of problems. So there's all sorts of things. There are various plots against Nero. We have to get rid of Nero, blah, 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 blah. But he's killing off all the plotters. Well, eventually it catches up with him. Eventually it all comes crashing down. And Nero is done in. All right, he's finally assassinated. He's killed off. So they killed off the emperor, and he's out of the picture. But now we're at the year 69 AD, and this is going to be a tough year because they still don't have a system of picking the next emperor. And in the year 69 AD, the entire empire was in a period of total political chaos. It was absolutely nuts because who's going to be the emperor? They don't know. They don't have an emperor picked out. So it's chaos. The year 69 was a very, very rough year for the Roman Empire. All right, a very rough year because of this problem with succession. Eventually, however, it will get pulled out here. A fellow named Vespasian is going to pull the empire back together and get things back on track. And he starts up another group of Roman emperors. We call them the Flavians, and we'll pick up their story next time.